Hello and welcome to Revelation Study. We are on chapter 8 and this is session 17. So thus far we have completed 16 sessions and up to chapter 7. So tonight we are going to study chapter 8. So this is going to be an interesting chapter and we have to put on our thinking caps and try to see what we can come up with. I'm going to explain when we get there. So before we get to chapter 8, I just want to give you an outline where we are with this particular study. It's altogether 21 judgments. So there are three principal series of judgments in Revelation. So the first 7 are the seal judgments. So started in chapter 6, we started with the first seal. And then we have the trumpet judgments. And then followed by the bowl judgments. That's the 7th bowl. We are going to study the last one in chapter 16. So today we are going to study chapter 8. The action of the book is carried forward for the most part by these series of events that we are going to study. So the seal judgments, the trumpet judgments, and the bowl judgments. And here is the chart with the 7 seals. Between 6th seal and 7th seal, there is a pause. There is a parenthetical material, parenthesis you call it, and then when you get to 7 trumpets, you follow the same pattern. There is a pause between 6 and 7. Same thing with the 7 bowls between 6 and 7. So when we completed the 6 seals, we hit with a pause. So in that pause, last week we studied the 144,000 Jewish evangelists getting sealed. And I mentioned that they are not the Jehovah's Witnesses, as they claim that 144,000. And of course, they only believe that 144,000 will go to heaven. I'm not going to repeat all that now because we studied that in one complete session. So please go back and watch chapter 7. Tonight we are going to see chapter 8. We finished that pause and now we are on to the 7th seal. So we are going to see the 7th seal being broken or opened. I also showed you this chart because I personally believe this the 7 seals time-wise it is stretched forth during the whole tribulation period. So let's say when you open the 7th seal, there is basically nothing happening at the 7th seal, but the 7 trumpets were installed or start to begin with the 7 trumpets. And the same thing with the 7th trumpet. So there it comes with the 7 bowls. So that's why I stretched out the 7th to the whole time frame, if you will. So, and some people think that these are from different views or different angles because we were not given a timeline when each one starts. Of course, John is writing what he saw. So he may be seeing, different views from different angles of the same picture. The reason I say that is, in 6th seal, we have a lot of things happening with the sun and moon getting dark and cataclysmic events happening there. So I personally believe that is towards the end. So we are going to see all these things coming towards together. So either way, so just to have an idea what we are looking at, you have 6 seals followed by a pause, which we studied last week with the 144,000 Jewish evangelists sealed. They are Jewish evangelists. They are Jewish people. 12,000 from each tribe. So don't get, equate that to some group or some people or some church. So we need to be very careful there. So I also want to show you here the difference between the 24 elders and the tribulation saints. So in the 24 elders, they are crowned. They have harps. They are raptured before tribulation based on all the other studies we looked at. And they sit on the thrones. They reign as kings and priests. John did not question about who these 24 are. But if you look at the tribulation saints, they are not crowned. They have palms in their hands and they are saved out of tribulation. These are called tribulation saints. They stand before the thrones. They serve him day and night. And John, of course, did not recognize them. Of course, these are all we studied in the previous sessions. I'm just recapping some of this. And with that, now we are on chapter 8, verse 1, 7th seal. So the seventh seal is a prelude to the seven trumpets. When he opened the seventh seal, there was silence in heaven for about half an hour. And I saw the seven angels who stand before God, and to them were given seven trumpets. So it is very interesting. So far we have seen the lightnings, the thunderings, the all kinds of things, so much happening in heaven when John saw the visions. But when we get to the seventh seal, there was silence in heaven for about half an hour. So I just want to share what I came across. Dr. Miggy once told this story that he was in a student's camp or some camp, and there was a group of girls and there was a few boys debating on something. So he went there to talk to them to see what's going on. So and then the girls complained that the boy was telling them that there will not be any woman in heaven. So and then Dr. Miggy asked them, so why do you think so, young man? So and his reply was, I read this verse, Revelation 8:1. He says, when the seventh seal is opened, there was silence in heaven for about half an hour. So, so there's no woman in heaven, so that's the idea. So anyway, that is on a lighter note here. That's what Dr. Miggy explained about that situation, but that's not the case. That's not the reason why there was silence in heaven. We are going to study here. And verse 2, and I saw the seven angels who stand before God, and to them were given seven trumpets. So you see now the seventh seal was opened. Nothing happened except there was silence in heaven for about half an hour. And also it is getting the ready for the seven trumpets. So second verse makes it clear. And I saw seven angels who stand before God, and to them were given seven trumpets. So the seven trumpets are getting ready with the seventh seal. So the seventh seal has no content of its own. That's what we just saw. So the seventh seal has no content on its own. Rather, it contains and serves to introduce the trumpet judgments. So in the previous cases, every time, let's say the first seal is opened, there comes the rider on the white horse and something like that. But when the seventh seal is opened, there was nothing specific attached to that seventh seal. So that's what it says. The seventh seal has no content of its own. Rather, it contains and serves to introduce the trumpet judgments. So that's what we see here even in the picture. So seventh seal tied to the seven trumpets. The Lord Jesus Christ is still in command. He opens the seventh seal and there is introduced a fanfare of seven trumpets. He directs the action now from heaven. We need to keep that before us through the entire book. Do not lose sight of the fact that Revelation presents him in his glory as the judge of all the earth. So the idea is Jesus Christ is still in command, so he is opening the seals, and whenever he opens the seals, you see some action going on there. So this is a very solemn scene. The Lord Jesus Christ orders a halt on all fronts, heaven, hell, and earth. Nothing can move without his permission. He had already ordered the cessation of natural forces on the earth when he ordered the sealing of 144,000. Remember last session we studied, there was the wind is stopped on all the four corners. So that is what he's talking about. He had already ordered the cessation of natural forces on earth when he ordered the sealing of 144,000. Now for a brief moment, there is a pause in judgment activity. There is a heavenly hush. The silence is a pause of action. It is the calm before the storm. So I don't know how many of you notice that there will be always a calm before the eye of the storm hits you. So, so that's what it's talking about. It is the calm before the storm. God is reluctant to judge, for he is slow to anger. Judgment is his strange work. So sometimes people think, oh, God is angry all the time. God is going to judge, but Bible tells a different picture. God is reluctant to judge. But of course, he is a righteous God and he has to judge, and that's why he is judging when it needs to be. So God is reluctant to judge, for he is slow to anger. Judgment is a strange work. Isaiah writes, for the Lord will rise up as at Mount Perazim. He will be angry as in the valley of Gibeon, that he may do his work, his awesome, some translation says a strange work, and bring to pass his act, his unusual act. So the anger or the judgment is an unusual act of God. So it is not a routine thing. It is not. That's why the passage I started with saying God is reluctant to judge, because it is strange to him to judge. And also Isaiah says it is his unusual act. So Isaiah 28:21 makes it clear. So verse 3, then another angel. So if you look at it, there we talked about the another angel. So the point I'm trying to make is the Greek word used is allos, not heteros. Allos is another, heteros is also another. But the idea, the difference is, so you have in Greek two different meanings with the same another. Another of same kind or another of different kind, right? So you can have then another. What another? Another just does not give a complete picture in English for us. But in Greek, allos means another of the same kind. That's what the idea here is. So then another, the allos, angel, that's another of the same kind, having a golden censer, came and stood at the altar. He was given much incense. Then he should offer it with the prayers of all the saints upon the golden altar which was before the throne. So a few points to note down here. Golden censer. So some of us even don't know what that means. So if we study the Old Testament, always the priests go before the altar and they offer incense, and they used to carry these golden censers. Some of you might have seen this with the Roman Catholic Church. So they carry with some kind of a censer with some kind of incense coming out of it. So that's the idea here. So verse 3, then another angel having a golden censer came and stood at the altar. So you have the picture yourselves. You have the altar and you have the angel coming with a golden censer, came and stood at the altar. He was given much incense. Incense is kind of some kind of perfume that when you put that in the coals or burning hot coals, it just you get the incense out of it. You get a sweet aroma. So and the Bible compares it that our prayers are like a sweet incense before God. He was given much incense, that the angel was given much incense, that he should offer it with the prayers of all the saints upon the golden altar, which was before the throne. So keep this in mind. I think lately when I was studying on this, it just dawned on me, our prayers will never go waste. It is always, think about this, our prayers always is like an incense before the Lord. Whether you see it immediately, whether you noticed it or not. So one day you are going to see that our prayers are like incense before a holy God. So never, your prayers will never go waste. So you are encouraged to pray. So here is a picture I found of a golden censer. I don't know whether this is what you are going to see in heaven. So don't call me in heaven and tell me that, hey, you showed me a different picture. But so this is all the best I could have here. So to just to get an idea. A censer that you can carry with and which has some kind of a coals, burning coals in it, and you put this incense on it, you get this sweet aroma or smell. So here is another picture to show you the high priest at the altar of incense with his golden censer. So you have the picture. He has the golden censer, but then he goes and poured this incense on the altar, and you have this. And also this is not unique to some kind of a Jewish, Judeo-Christian religion. So I have seen some kind of incense sticks used in Hinduism, used in Buddhism, all kinds of people. They have they use some perfume for some kind of incense sticks in their worship as well. So just to make it a point. And the smoke of the incense with the prayers of the saints ascended before God from the angel's hand. So now you get the picture. So the incense was burned, and then the smoke of the incense with the prayers of the saints ascended before God from the angel's hand. Verse 5. Then the angel took the censer, filled it with fire from the altar. So from the altar he took the fire and threw it on the earth. So that's the judgment. So then the angel took the censer, filled it with fire from the altar, and threw it to the earth. And there were noises, thunderings, lightnings, and an earthquake. So you see, so far before this, there was a silence for about half an hour. And you see they started having all these kinds of things going on. So in verse 5, the angel took the censer, filled it with fire from the altar, and threw it to the earth, and there were noises, thunderings, lightnings, and an earthquake. So the 7 angels who had the 7 trumpets prepared themselves to sound. So that's just the prelude to the 7 trumpets. The 7 angels were given trumpets to announce the outpouring of God's wrath. The prayers of the saints were mixed with incense before the throne of God. I just want to remind you that in the previous class, in chapter 6 or chapter 5, we studied about the tribulation saints, their souls at the throne, crying to God, saying, Lord, how long? How long are you going to wait to judge? So remember the prayers of those saints, and then the answer was given, wait for some time until all the saints, all the tribulation saints come into the were gathered. So you compare that with what happened before the prayers, and now comes the judgment is coming, the fulfillment of for their prayers. So the prayers of the saints were mixed with incense before the throne of God. In other words, their prayers did not go unanswered. These were the prayers for vindication before their enemies. God responded with a fearsome display of anger through lightning and an earthquake. And we can see the same kind of thing in Psalms, prayer and incense. In Psalm 141, Lord, I cry out to you, make haste to me. Give ear to my voice when I cry out to you. In verse 2 it says, let my prayer be set before you as incense, the lifting up of hands as the evening sacrifice. Always, even in the Old Testament, the psalmist writes, he equates the prayer with the incense. So that's why he says in verse 2, let my prayer be set before you as incense, the lifting up of hands as the evening sacrifice. So that is Psalm 141, 1 and 2. And there are other places where the people misused this incense and they got into trouble. In Leviticus chapter 10, verse 1 and 2, you see Nadab and Abihu. In verse 1, chapter 10 of Leviticus, then Nadab and Abihu, the sons of Aaron, each took his censer and put fire in it, put incense on it, and offered profane fire before the Lord, which he had not commanded them. So when they misuse, they have very strict code of conduct, especially in the Old Testament. They were given very strict details how they should do it, where they should pick up the fire, and how to offer this fire and all. But Nadab and Abihu violated all that. Nadab and Abihu, the sons of Aaron, they just went and put some kind of a fire, and each took his censer and put fire in it, put incense on it. They thought they can just go by without getting judgment on them. But it says they put incense on it and offered profane fire before the Lord, which he had not commanded them. So clearly that mentions why they were judged, because God has not commanded them to do that way. In verse 2, so fire went out from the Lord and devoured them, and they died before the Lord. So it is very dangerous to do certain things, so here this is a reminder. In the Old Testament we see Nadab and Abihu using their censer, putting on a wrong fire and offering wrong incense before the Lord, which the Lord has not commanded them. The 7 angels now prepared to sound them, each indicating another set of judgments, each with increasing intensity. So these judgments take place after the seal judgments, probably in the last half of the tribulation. The events associated with the trumpets strongly parallel those of the Exodus, albeit on a vastly wider scale. So we are basically, what we are seeing here are the plagues, whether you call it judgments or plagues, a lot of plagues coming on earth. So here, sometimes when we study about all these plagues coming on the earth, it all definitely reminds us the Exodus judgments. So when the people were in the Egypt and Moses was trying to deliver them out of the Pharaoh's hand, and you see a lot of judgments coming there. So it reminds us of what happened in Exodus. And also another point I want to highlight is each with increasing intensity. So when the whole 7-year tribulation starts, probably it starts very slowly, and then as you progress into the time, year by year, month by month, the frequency and the intensity keeps increasing. So what do we call that? Jesus himself said that he used a separate term called what? Birth pangs. So most of you ladies know what the birth pang is, so it starts slowly and then gradually the pain increases and also the frequency increases. So Jesus compared these judgments with birth pangs. So that is what it probably it starts slowly and then it just intensifies. I am not going to say all of this will exactly start the moment the rapture happens and immediately the 7-year tribulation begins. I personally think these birth pangs will already start and then it slowly go to the peak or to some extent and then rapture happens and then you see all that. So that's why when you look at the current news, it sometimes really tells me that there is something going on. I don't know how much you are paying attention to. If you look at the current news, I'm talking about yesterday and day before, just one day or 2 days news. China is flooded, so not like historical floods they call it, 1,000-year flood, whatever they call it. So a lot of cities were flooded. And there's a typhoon, they're passing by hitting very hard. And the same thing is happening in India, Western India right now. So a lot of people, mudslides and all kinds of calamities. And this is just to name a few. And of course, in Afghanistan, when the US troops are pulled out and the Taliban, you remember the Taliban, they are now occupying half the country. So the point is the same thing in several countries. I'm just giving you a couple of examples. You can just go and look at the news, what I'm mentioning. And of course, last week I also mentioned about the birds that are dying without a cause in the East Coast. And also I talked about the fish dying on the Florida coast with a red tide coming in. So these are just some of the examples. When you put all these things together, so what is going on in this world? And of course, the temperatures are soaring, so California and Canada, and you read about the fires, forest fires, right? All this within the last week. I'm talking about all these things happening within the last week. And also the Germany. So look at Germany and Europe. How many cities are flooded? Even Great Britain is flooded right now. So these are all just, I'm not saying these are the birth pangs. I am saying these are starting to go towards the direction. And I think by the time we get to the actual tribulation period, this will be an all-time peak. So people will wonder what is going on. And that is what exactly I just want to point out. Some of these things are already going on, and some of the things, lawlessness, of course, is abounding. Lawlessness is increasing. So just to, that's why when I look at the news, and people were wondering, the news readers were saying, what is going on? We can't understand what's going on. I do understand, because you read the Bible Bible tells us what's going on. Of course, these things will happen before the end, and sometimes we need to be prepared when we read these things to understand what is going on in this world. The increasing frequency, here is a chart. You see it starts with slowly, and then the closer you get to the end, the frequency will increase, and also the magnitude will increase. We talked about the birth pangs. Revelation 8:7. The first angel sounded, and hail and fire followed, mingled with blood, and they were thrown to the earth. And a third of the trees were burnt up, and all the green grass was burnt up. Sometimes we wonder, how can this happen? But when we look at the California fires and other places where there are wildfires and just wiping out everything, and so this is going in a much larger proportions here. The first angel sounded, and hail and fire followed, mingled with blood, and they were thrown to the earth, and a third of the trees were burnt up, and all green grass was burnt up. The first trumpet consisted of a horrifying mixture of elements that were cast upon the earth. These destroyed 1/3 of the remaining vegetation, intensifying the famine. So we studied about all these famines and all kinds of wars going on, and on top of it, this hail is again going to hit hard, and it's going to struck on the vegetation. So the first trumpet consists of a horrifying mixture of the elements that were cast upon the earth. These destroyed 1/3 of the remaining vegetation, intensifying the famine. I just want to remind you of what we studied in Exodus. In Exodus chapter 9, 17 to 19, we read a similar passage. So sometimes when we read Revelation, we think, how can this happen? We actually saw this happening before in the past. So that is what I want to show you. Exodus chapter 9, verse 17. Verse 17, as yet you exalt yourself against my people, in that you will not let them go. Behold, tomorrow about this time I will cause very heavy hail to rain down, such as has not been in Egypt since its founding until now. Verse 19, therefore send now and gather your livestock and all that you have in the field, for the hail shall come down on every man and every animal which is found in the field, and is not brought home, and they shall die. Here God is warning Moses to gather all his flock and all the things that need to be brought inside, so that they were not destroyed by this hail. And in verse 20, he who feared the word of the Lord among the servants of Pharaoh made his servants and his livestock flee to the houses. But he who did not regard the word of the Lord left his servants and his livestock in the field. Verse 22, then the Lord said to Moses, stretch out your hand toward heaven, and there may be hail in all the land of Egypt, on man, on beast, and on every herb of the field throughout the land of Egypt. And in verse 23, and Moses stretched out his rod toward heaven, and the Lord sent thunder and hail and fire, darted to the ground. And the Lord rained hail on the land of Egypt. So there was hail and fire mingled with hail, so very heavy that there was none like it in all the land of Egypt since it became a nation. So this is nothing new. The point I'm trying to say is these plagues, the judgments that we are going to see in the book of Revelation, has already happened in the past in Egypt. But this time it is going to be much greater scale and with a very high intensity. So that is what I wanted to show you, comparing against what happened with Egypt. And in verse 25, and the hail struck throughout the whole land of Egypt, all that was in the field, both man and beast. And the hail struck every herb of the field and broke every tree of the field. Only in the land of Goshen, where the children of Israel were, there was no hail. So you all know the story. There is a separation between Goshen and the rest of the Egypt, and where the children of Israel were staying and where the Egyptians were staying. So this hail hit hard on the Egyptians, but not on the children of Israel. So now coming back to the trumpets, the second trumpet, the seas struck. Earlier, the first trumpet, you saw the vegetation got stuck, and now we see the seas get struck. Then the second angel sounded, and something like a great mountain burning with fire was thrown into the sea, and a third of the sea became blood. And a third of the living creatures in the sea died, and a third of the ships were destroyed. I don't know what you want to call this great mountain. This is what John saw. John saw a vision. Remember, John sees whatever he saw, he is writing. And of course, he is writing using his vocabulary. Whatever he could write, whatever he sees it. So for him, a mountain burning with fire, something like a mountain. Always you note down the words when the Bible says like. He is not saying it's a mountain. He is saying it is something like a mountain. Always, that's why I highlighted here. And you are going to see several times in the Revelation like. So that means he is just comparing to the best of his ability to make us understand what he is seeing. He is seeing something like a great mountain burning with fire was thrown into the sea. We don't have to debate what this is. That is what he saw, something like a mountain. So we can imagine something like a mountain burning into the sea, or thrown into the sea. A third of the sea became blood. When this was happening, a third of the sea became blood, and a third of the living creatures in the sea died. A third of the ships were destroyed. That's a lot of ships. A third of ships means a lot of ships. Here I just want to show you what could happen. There could be asteroids. It could be comets, meteoroids, or meteors. So whatever that is, I'm not going to debate, or I'm not going to say this is the one thing that is going to happen. But John saw something like a mountain of fire coming down and hitting on the seas. And it is going to be a big one, because 1/3 of the seas, 1/3 of everything was destroyed. You are going to see this 1/3 concept throughout the book of Revelation. There is a greater significance for this 1/3. I'm going to show you what this 1/3 means. But compare, 1/3 is a big number, so whatever that is, the whole thing, so 1/3 is going to be struck. So I think it's going to be some kind of an asteroid or something that comes by and hits Earth. So when it comes, whenever it enters Earth's atmosphere, it always burns. So that's what probably John saw when it is burning and coming and hitting the earth. So we saw something similar in Exodus chapter 7 verse 20. And Moses and Aaron did so just as the Lord commanded. So he lifted up the rod and struck the waters that were in the river in the sight of Pharaoh and in the sight of his servants. And what happens? And all the waters that were in the river were turned to blood. So this was the plague of the water becoming blood in the days of Moses. So Moses and Aaron just did what Lord commanded them to do, lift up their rod and struck the waters, and the waters turned to blood. So I'm showing you some parallels with the plagues of Egypt, with the plagues that are happening, with the judgments that are happening in the book of Revelation. In Exodus 7:21, verse 21, it says, the fish that were in the river died, the river stank, and the Egyptians could not drink the water of the river. So there was blood throughout all the land of the Egypt. So it was a horrifying plague during the time of Exodus. And now we come to the third trumpet. The waters struck. So when the third trumpet, the waters get struck. Verse 10. Revelation 8:10. Then the third angel sounded, and a great star fell from heaven. Underline the word great and underline the word star. So what is this? Then the third angel sounded, and a great star fell from heaven, burning like a torch, and it fell on the third of the rivers and on the springs of water. The name of the star is Wormwood. A third of the waters became wormwood, and many men died from water because it was made bitter. So here we need to understand what this great star is. So a great star fell from heaven, burning like a torch, and it fell on the third of the rivers and on the springs of the water. Again, I am not going to say this is exactly what is going to happen. I am just giving my interpretation of what we are studying here. So I have been studying this book for several years, and so whatever God is trying to help me with the understanding of these passages, that is what I am trying to help you with these passages. We could also interpret in different ways, and sometimes it could be there could be multiple interpretations of the same passage also possible. So when we talk about a mountain, as I showed you earlier, it could be an asteroid, real asteroid coming down and hitting. But mountains are also represented as kingdoms. Sometimes we don't know if a kingdom may fall. Maybe remember the red horse, there is wars going on during this time. So there could be a kingdom that's going to fall, and as a result of that fighting, we could see potentially 1/3 of maybe a nuclear bomb going off somewhere and hitting something. So there could be all kinds of explanations, but what we are trying to understand is what John saw. So always, whatever our interpretation could be, but we always have to come back to the actual text. The actual text was John saw a mountain of fire coming down and hitting the water. And again, now, how do we interpret this passage? Now in verse 10, then the third angel sounded, and a great star fell from heaven, burning like a torch, and it fell on the third of the waters and on the springs of water. The name of the star is Wormwood. That means some kind of a bitter star here. A third of waters became wormwood, and many men died from the water because it was made bitter. So there are some things happening. A star falling down, and then the waters getting bitter, and people are dying. So these are the three things that are happening. So let's follow along and see what other passages says. A star is mentioned in the Bible as an angel. So we can clearly see in several passages. In Job 38 verses 4-7. That's why first of all I want to go back. Maybe underline those words. A great star. Underline the word great. Underline the word star. That's what I mentioned, right? So great star fell from heaven. So now let's go back to Job chapter 38 verse 4, where this is God talking to Job. Job asked a question, and then God was answering Job. Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth, Job? Tell me if you have understanding. Who determined its measurements? Surely you know. Or who stretched the line upon it? To what were its foundations fastened? Or who laid its cornerstone? This is all about the foundations of the earth. Where were when the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy? So God is saying, talking to Job and saying, when the earth's foundations were laid and when earth is set up in motion, where were you, Job? And at that time, all the morning stars sang together and shouted with joy. So what are the morning stars talking about here? In a Jewish literature, always if it's the second sentence, the meaning conveys the first sentence. So here if you read it, when the morning stars and followed by sons of God, they are talking about the same thing. So the morning stars represents the sons of God, and of course we clearly know what the sons of God is in Job chapter 1, chapter 2. I don't have time to go there. I'm giving you the answer. So the sons of God represents the angels. So Job chapter 1 and Job chapter 2 makes it very clear. So the sons of God represents the angels, and here the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy, which again the morning stars also represents the sons of God, which also represents the star, which also represents the angels. So that is my point. So in the Bible, stars most of the time are equated to the angels. I am not saying the good or bad angels. It's generally the angels, because some angels fell because of sin. So we are going to see that later. But in general, all these morning stars, when actually this verse in Job chapter 38 verse 7 was written or writing about this particular passage, that time there was no fall. This includes all the angels. So when the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy, I believe that time before this was before Lucifer's fall. So morning stars represents the angels here. That's my point. And also stars represents, here let's see another passage, Revelation chapter 2. God is promising to give a morning star. So we studied this earlier, Revelation 2:26. And he who overcomes and keeps my works until the end, to him I will give power over the nations. I mentioned this, I'm not going to repeat the whole thing. Who is an overcomer? An overcomer is the one who holds on to his faith in Jesus Christ until the end. That person is an overcomer. 1 John 5 says who is an overcomer. And verse 27, he shall rule them with a rod of iron. They shall be dashed to pieces like the potter's vessel. Also, as I also have received from my Father, and I will give him the morning star. So Jesus is promising the overcomer, a believer, a morning star. So there is always an association of a star with an angel, association of a star with an overcomer. So there is something we don't understand in our in human nature, but in the spirit world there is always an angel or a spirit being associated with a star, and God is promising a morning star here for the overcomer. So that is the idea. And also we see this in Revelation 22. Jesus himself is also called the morning star. In Revelation 22:16, I, Jesus, have sent my angel to testify to you these things in the churches. I am the root and the offspring of David. That's talking about Jesus Christ. And the bright and the morning star. You see that? So the bright and the morning star here represents Jesus Christ. So there is always in the spirit world. So probably we in our human bodies with this, with our natural eyes, we cannot see all this going on. The moment our spirit leaves the body, then you will be able to understand all this, what we are studying here. So Jesus is called the morning star, bright and morning star here. Then the 70, that is the 70 disciples, returned with joy, saying, Lord, even the demons are subject to us in your name. So Jesus sent out these 70 disciples to minister, and they came back with a report and saying, Lord, even the demons are subject to us in your name. And he said to them, I saw Satan falling like lightning. The Greek word used is astrape. This astrape is translated into English as lightning, but you see the word used for star in other places, it's used as aster. So there is not, it's the same root word. If you look at it, astrope and aster, that's the same root word, but somehow this English translation used it as lightning. So, but anyway, I saw Satan fall like a star, you could say, or fall like a lightning from heaven. So that is my point. So Jesus is saying, I saw, this is Jesus can see into the future. He says, I saw Satan fall like lightning or astrope from heaven. So you remember when the Satan sinned, Satan was taken out of his position. But sometimes people think, oh, Satan was kicked out of heaven. So no. Satan still have access to heaven. Satan was kicked out of his position, but Satan has access to heaven. How do I know Satan has access to heaven? You read Job chapter 1 and chapter 2. It makes it very clear that Satan was among the angels that were standing before the holy God and giving an account. So Satan was still having access, although fallen angel, still having access. So at some time, that is where we are going to see in the Revelation, Satan will be completely thrown down from heaven, no more access. At that time, Satan gets furious and then, understands that his time is on a short fuse, and then he's going to persecute the Jewish people and all that. We are going to see that. But the point I'm trying to make is Jesus sees everything what's going to happen in the future also. So here in verse 18 he says, and he said to them, I saw Satan fall like lightning, astrope from heaven. So Satan is going to fall. So at least for now I understand Satan having access to heavens because of the passages that we study in Job. So that is the reason why I would say that. And also in other passages in Revelation we see Satan will be thrown completely down from heaven. In Revelation 8:12, then the fourth angel sounded. So now we got to the fourth angel. When the fourth angel sounded, and a third of the sun was struck, a third of the moon, and a third of the stars, so that a third of them were darkened. A third of the day did not shine, and likewise the night. This is one of the very difficult passages to understand in the book of Revelation. I have seen people coming up with different ideas and different interpretations, but I'm going to explain my interpretation. I'm not asking you to buy what I'm saying, but I'm just giving you what my thinking is on this. So Revelation 8:12 is one of the really hard passages. And here it says, when the fourth angel sounded, a third of the sun was struck, a third of the moon, and a third of the stars, so that a third of them were darkened. A third of the day did not shine, and likewise the night. So the point is, will this really happen? The answer is yes. At some point in time, the sun's brightness will be dimmed, and the moon will be dimmed, and we see some of the stars will not even shine their light. So let's say I'm just throwing some numbers. Don't count. Don't take that to the bank. So let's say if you see 1,000,000 stars tonight, right? If you go out and count 1,000,000 stars, and then what I'm saying is when this particular event happens, you see 1/3 of that 1,000,000 stars will go away, or you won't see them. So that is the idea. So let's say if the sun's intensity is 1,000 lumens, whatever you measure the light there, right? And when this particular thing happens, you see the intensity going down by 1/3. Same thing with the moon. So that is the idea. But also I always thought about why is this happening and what's the significance. A third of the stars, keep this word, what is a star? We just studied what a star is, right? A great star is what? A Lucifer, or the angel, the leader of this pack. And now we are talking about a third of the stars. So there were billions of, millions and millions of angels that God created in the beginning. We know that. But with the fall, what happened was the great star, the Lucifer, took 1/3 of the stars with him, with the angels with him, right? So we're going to see. So now, let me go back to this passage. We are going ahead now. We are going to come back to this at a later point of time, but just for the reference, I'm going to pick some verses from Revelation chapter 12. When we get to Revelation 12, we are going to study one more time in detail, but for now, in Revelation 12 verse 3, it says, and another sign appeared in heaven. Behold, a great fiery red dragon. Of course, we all know who this is. This is Satan. A great fiery red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 diadems on his heads. And verse 4 is the key we want to focus on. His tail drew a third of the stars of heaven. So what is Satan doing here? When Satan fell, his tail drew a third of stars of heaven and threw them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman who was ready to give birth and devour her child as soon as it was born. I'm going to explain who this woman is and who the child is and all that, so we are not going to study that now. But the point I want to highlight here is, when Satan, the red dragon, was thrown down, his tail drew a third of the stars of heaven. So that is the point I want to highlight. And the stars of heaven, 1/3. When you take 1/3 of everything, I think that is what the previous verse was talking about. So keep this in mind. His tail drew a third of the stars. So now 1/3 of the stars will not give light because they are falling down here, 1/3. And there is a connection. I am not going to say that has to be that way, but there is some kind of a significance. When God created all this, there is some kind of a significance. The radiance of the sun and the radiance of the moon is somehow tied to the number of stars, number of angels being created. I don't know how, I don't know why, but that is what I personally believe. So let me repeat this. That's the brightness of the sun and the brightness of the moon and the individual stars are somehow tied to the angels that were created. And now, when you take 1/3 of those angels down, right, 1/3 of the stars will not give light because 1/3 was stars falling down. And don't think that these are literally the stars, coming down and falling on earth. That will not happen because the earth is compared with the stars. The earth's size is smaller than some of those stars. Even if you look at there are stars that are even bigger. So that's why the passage is very clear. These stars represents angels, and 1/3 of the stars falling from heaven represents the fallen angels. So if it makes sense to you, that is what it is all about. So let's go further. If you look at 1/3 of a moon, this is what it looks like. And does this ring a bell? When you just look at this 1/3 moon, what does it, what do you think of? A third of a moon. Most of the time we see this and we don't pay attention to this. But there is a real significance to this 1/3 of a moon. What do you call a crescent moon? Now, you have 1/3 of the fallen angels falling down, 1/3 of the moon is not giving light during that time, and 1/3 of the sun is not giving light and all that. And if you eliminate that fallen 1/3, this is what you get. So you are now focusing on 1/3, the 1/3 that was fallen, the 1/3 that's supposed not to give light, the 1/3 that is the fallen by the angels, the fallen rebellious angels. And now this 1/3, if you just take that separately out of the main moon and look at only the 1/3, this is what you get. And have you seen this symbol, Islam's crescent moon? So that is, they worship this, of course, in any mosques or even all these religious symbols. It's tied to a crescent moon. And also they have a significance of a star. So I don't know what you want to make this up. I just want to connect you with some things that I have come across, and you make up your mind. So, but there is a very clear resemblance between with 1/3 of the stars falling and 1/3 of the moon not giving light, but that 1/3 is shown somewhere as a religious symbol, as a crescent moon. And not only in Islam, it's not just in Islam. If you look at the Hinduism, you look at Shiva, and his head is always shows that 1/3 moon. That he had a crescent moon on his head. Of course, he had a serpent on his head, and all that. These are the religious symbols. This is the goddess or god of Lord Shiva, they call it in Hinduism. How these symbols are tied to all the other religions, where Satan's worship is being done. Or other Hinduism worships this crescent moon, and of course on the head of Shiva. and also Islam's significance of this crescent moon, 1/3. And I looked and I heard an angel flying through the midst of the heavens, saying with a loud voice, oh, to the inhabitants of the earth, because of the remaining blasts of the trumpet of the three angels who are about to sound. So far, you have seen 4 trumpets. So we have completed 4 trumpets. Even within the 7 pack, individually 7 trumpets, or whether 7 seals or 7 bowls, the first 4 are one kind, and the last 3 are a different kind. Same thing goes with the seals. Remember, first 4 are what? Horse, rider on the white horse, red horse, and then you have the black horse, and then you have the green or a pale horse. So the first 4 are a kind. And similarly here, the first 4 trumpets, when we saw those trumpets, we see a lot of things, the devastation happening on earth. But then the 3 trumpets, the remaining 3 trumpets are woes. Oh, to the inhabitants of the earth, because of the remaining blast of the trumpet of the 3 angels who are about to sound. So this is what I'm saying is the first 4 are a kind and the 3 are a kind, different kind. So that is what here you see. So before we get further, I just want to conclude or recap what we studied about this 1/3. So this 1/3 moon this is the verse that you need to really pay attention to, otherwise you won't understand what's going on. Revelation 12:3. Again, when we get to this particular chapter, Revelation 12, I'm going to explain in detail about the fiery red dragon and all that. But for now, his trail drew a third of the stars of heaven. So that is where I concluded my understanding of this passage. That is where 1/3 of the angels fell. The fallen angels are always represented as 1/3. And here clearly his tail drew a third of the stars of heaven, and that 1/3 of the tied to the moon. So 1/3 is a crescent moon which is being worshipped. And also in Islam we see that, and also in Hinduism. So that is the point I want to make here, the main significant point in this chapter 8. And as I said in verse 13, and I looked and I heard an angel flying, and some translation says an eagle flying. So the word angel here, some translations translated as eagle. We don't have to worry about that, whether it's a real angel or really an eagle flying through the midst of the heaven, saying with a loud voice, oh, there's a woes coming. So there's the 3 angels who are about to sound the remaining blasts of the trumpets. So the 5th trumpet, the locusts from the bottomless pit. So now we are up to what? The 5th one, 5th, 6th and 7th, the last 3 trumpets, right? So now, but what happens here is a break in the chapter. So the 5th trumpet, the locusts from the bottomless pit, chapter 9. I'm not going to study chapter 9 tonight, but I'm going to show you something that I'm going to continue next week. So the 4 trumpets are done or over in chapter 8. But the 5th trumpet, as I said, it's a separate section, so starts in chapter 9. In chapter 9, we see this. Then the 5th angel sounded, and I saw a star fallen from heaven to the earth. To him was given the key to the bottomless pit. And he opened the bottomless pit, and smoke rose out of the pit like a smoke of a great furnace. So the sun and the air were darkened because of the smoke of the pit. Next week, we are going to unpack what this means. So you have to hang on until that time. So chapter 9 we are going to study next week. In chapter 9 we are going to study the remaining trumpets, and especially the 5th trumpet, and when we see the star fallen from heaven, and to him was given the key. And sometimes people think Satan is ruling the hell, and sometimes people joke, I go to hell with my buddy and have a beer and all that kind of jokes. Actually, if you look at it, hell was created for Satan and his angels. Satan is not ruling hell. So don't get that wrong, So, and even here, you see, to him was given the key. So Satan was given the key. So he didn't have the key, first of all. So he was given the key to open the bottomless pit. And he opened, and then, of course, we read, And he opened the bottomless pit, and smoke arose out of a pit like a smoke of a great furnace. So the sun and the air were darkened because of the smoke of the pit. Anyway, so we are going to unpack chapter 9 next week, God willing. So thank you for watching, and we conclude chapter 8 tonight. If you have not subscribed to these videos, please, this channel, please do subscribe to this channel. And also, if you like these videos, give a like, share it with your friends. The YouTube address is youtube.com/Dr. John Reddy. And also you can visit my blog dailydevotion.org. Thank you for watching. See you next week.